Welcome to Inforce 2024. My name is Himanshu Verma. I lead the team of security specialists at Amazon. And I'm joined with Ross Warren, who's a product solution architect. In this session, TDR320, we're going to talk about using generative AI and Amazon Security Lake to enhance your threat analysis. I think before we jump into the key topics here, just a quick check on some of the objectives that we'll cover in the session. Quick introduction on why data is important, and collecting security data is still a challenge for customers and organizations. What and how Amazon Security Lake can help customers. And then we also have an interactive demo that Ross is going to share on how Security Lake can be leveraged and the data that is in Security Lake can be leveraged to actually drive security outcomes for customers using generative AI. So we looked at a few surveys, and this is a survey that's represented here by a BI survey. What we found is that a lot of IT professionals still are struggling with collecting data when it comes to IT infrastructure and or their complete AWS or non-AWS infrastructure. So when we talk about customers' infrastructure, not necessarily does it have to be AWS workloads, but we also recognize that at times these workloads could be either in other cloud providers and or on-premise or in hybrid environments. And it can be challenging to bring all this data together. Also, a large majority, 52% of organizations in this survey want to keep, or they have a desire to keep that data online for longer periods of time so that they can act on that data. And this is where cost and complexity can become a challenge. As you can imagine, even with cloud workloads, these logs are pretty verbose, and then over a period of time, to store them for longer periods of time can add to that cost. So when we started asking customers, how can we help and solve for this, there were a few themes that emerged. First and foremost, as AWS infrastructures grow, more accounts, more resources, more workloads continue to add on. And that leads to additional logs that continue to generate. Also, when it comes to lifecycle management, we checked with customers and they were like, not only do we need to manage AWS workload logs or logs from AWS environments, but also across some of our other SaaS applications or on-premise environments, as well as non-AWS cloud providers. When we look at these logs, another challenge that emerged was that they're all proprietary in nature, which means every vendor tends to have logs in their own format. So for a security team or for security analysts who are looking for insights into these logs, it can become challenging when you're looking for an IP address, which might look different in CloudTrail or VPC flow logs versus a partner firewall log where that IP address might look very different. So proprietary nature of those logs led to another complexity where security teams were doing a lot of transformation and or applying ETL and or using Lambda and or automation to transform those logs before they could run SQL queries or join queries on that. And then finally, what we learned from customers was that in the process of aggregating these logs and or sending them to analytic tools, they were actually losing control over that data. So when we talk about transformative technologies like generative AI or feeding that log information to other tools for use cases, most of the times customers didn't really have access to that data because the logs had been sent off to third-party tools or analytic tools. So to help solve for this, we first set the groundwork by introducing or co-launching a framework that would standardize the schema format for these logs. And this was launched 2 years ago at Black Hat called Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. So AWS or Amazon, along with some of our other launch partners like Splunk, IBM, and others, launched this open security schema framework. By open, it means it's open source, so anybody can actually participate in that. And over the last 2 years, we've actually seen tremendous adoption of this schema framework. This is the groundworks to Amazon Security Lake, which is a service that we announced at reInvent last year and then was generally available earlier this year. So Amazon Security Lake is a service that now helps customers easily centralize, aggregate, and normalize all the log information in the OCSF or Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. Amazon Security Lake not only does this easily, but it also, in a few clicks, can actually do this across all AWS accounts and bring in information not only from native AWS log sources, but also from our partner tools as well as partner applications. So as I mentioned, most of our customers we recognize are using SaaS applications like their IDP tools, or using enterprise applications like their firewalls or endpoints, and or using custom log sources that they might already have. So with Security Lake, what we've done now is that made it easier for customers to aggregate all this information. The way this works is that there is a construct of what we call sources from where the information comes into Security Lake. For the native AWS log sources, this is already fully integrated and automated. Within the AWS console, there are very easy options that you can choose per account, per region, and per AWS log source, what is the information that you want to bring in. Also, in addition to that, you can add in additional log sources like SaaS applications or partner tools or custom log sources. Once this information is all in Security Lake, customers can then actually go ahead and apply lifecycle policies to define storage and retention times of how long do they want to keep that log source, or what type of storage and tiering do they want to apply to that. This helps with making it easier for managing the lifecycle of that data. Security Lake also automatically indexes and queues this data and transforms all that data in an OCSF or open schema format. So now that data is easily available. Typically, customers will have to write scripts to either transform that data into Athena or glue tables or run lambdas. All that stuff is done automatically. So a lot of the heavy lifting that customers were doing earlier can now be automated with a few clicks using Security Lake. And on the other end is the subscriber construct, which is now that the data is all there, how do you want to leverage and use that data? And that's where customers can either continue to use our partner tools or analytic tools, the typical SIM and or SOAR tools, or they can build their own analytics on top of that data, because now they have access to that data in their own S3 Lake Formation account within that Security Lake account. Over the period of time and the course of the last year, we've actually built several integrations as well. What you'll see here is on the very top are the native AWS sources that are integrated with Security Lake. In the fullness of time, we're continuing to add more and more support. But in the last few months, we've added support for AWS WAF logs based on customers' requirements, as well as EKS logs, and services like AWS App Fabric that bring in logs from third-party SaaS applications. And some of the common log sources like API activity or network activity using CloudTrail and VPC flow logs and DNS flow logs are also now natively integrated. So these are options that you can easily choose to enable, and Security Lake will ingest all that automatically without customers having to go in and pay for those ingestions separately or enable those logs separately. So that is a key differentiator, that as you choose these log sources in AWS or in Amazon Security Lake, they are automatically ingesting without customers having to spend cost on ingestion and or storage and or building that infrastructure. Additionally, we have partner sources that have been now integrated as well, and all those logs from partner tools, when they come in, they're also coming in the OCSF format. Once the logs are there, we also have partner tools that are now integrated on the subscriber end of the service as well. So we recognize that customers have various needs when it comes to security analytics, either using existing tools or building their own analytics. So customers can use AWS analytic tools like OpenSearch, QuickSights, Athena, etc. to query that log information. You'll see that in the demo later, where Ross will show you how AWS generative AI tools as well as our own analytic tools can be applied on that data. Security Lake also virtually index and queues that data. That means it's now ready for use in security tooling, and it has two ways that you can access this data. Either direct S3 access, because the data is stored in an S3 lake formation account, it's available in Parquet format that can be leveraged for direct access, or data in place access, which is using federated query access. So a lot of the cost that customers incur is egress cost, which is sending this data downstream to third-party tools, and we wanted to address that requirement as well. So analytic tools can now access that data in federated query search. I think you heard that in the keynote this morning. Some of our key partners on the analytics side, including Splunk, are now supporting this federated query search as well. So that means you don't have to move the data from the lake, you can actually query it from where it is. So when we talk about security analytics and how generative AI can be applied, we've actually published certain blog posts on this as well, but now that the data is all available in the S3 lake formation account, in the bucket, in Parquet format, all transformed in OCSF, that is where we are seeing customers now actually leveraging that data and applying generative AI tooling on top of that. Some of the key use cases here are reducing your organization's risk and increasing your security posture by leveraging artificial intelligence or Gen AI and building your own Gen AI tooling on top of that data. So here you'll see that what's happening is from the security lake account, once you move into the subscriber account, which is where that application is being built, you can leverage Gen AI tools like Amazon SageMaker and or Amazon Bedrock to apply foundational models on top of that normalized and standardized data to build either a Gen AI application, or you can have your own natural language processing application to ask questions rather than writing complex SQL queries and then getting the answers. So an easy example would be, rather than writing a SQL query to look for an IP address, you could ask natural language questions on that application that's being built on Bedrock to identify where all that IP address has manifested across all of the log sources that are now in Security Lake. Another example is to apply Amazon Quick Sites, and Amazon Quick Sites also includes a generative AI component that we provided to customers, which is Amazon Q in Amazon Quick Sites. So Amazon Q, which is our enterprise generative application, helps customers build interactive dashboards as well as visualizations based on their security needs and or their security team's needs. Once the data is in Security Lake, as I mentioned, it's actually readily available for use in Athena, where you can actually query it right away. Or you can apply Amazon Quick Sites on top of that data, and then Q in Quick Sites can be used to apply generative AI visualizations. So this helps customers to, based upon the teams and the personas that are interacting with that data, to build their own custom dashboarding and their custom visualization, and then apply natural language to build these visualizations easily as well. So this is another use case where generative AI can be applied to build deep insights on this data. Finally, one of the other use cases that we are seeing is customers building actually virtual security assistants. So this is again an example where something that we've actually posted and is available on our GitHub repo, where you can actually easily build a cybersecurity Gen AI assistant by acting on top of that data. So using Bedrock, you can actually launch an AI application that can be leveraged to answer incident response questions or to also automate response actions. So the architecture of this will be very similar, where once the data is all in Security Lake, or what you see on the right-hand side here, you can then apply either RAG providers like Kendra and or use Bedrock on top of that data to launch a Gen AI application. So with that said, I would like for Ross to actually demonstrate one of these use cases for you in the demo portion of this session.
Thank you, Himanshu. Am I on? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I can't hear myself. So, all right, in a hot 5 minutes, we're gonna, the second example that Himanshu just talked about is building dashboards in QuickSight using generative AI. Any of us security practitioners, you've gone before, tried to build dashboards in whatever tool, and it takes a while to figure out what exactly you need. Did I get it right? Do I have the right data? That dashboard you're seeing on the screen right now, and if I scroll down a little bit, I've got a whole bunch of panels. I'm going to show you in 4 minutes how I can use, I'll show you most of the process, how I can actually use generative AI in a couple quick examples to actually build those dashboards. So the data's in Security Lake, as Himanshu was talking about, it's all normalized. I've got all my AWS logs in there. I now have Amazon QuickSight, and we're now looking at Amazon QuickSight Q QuickSight, and we're going to start trying to figure out how to build this dashboard. To bring the data into QuickSight and so that Q knows about it, you build up a topic. I'm not going to walk through this, building up a topic, but basically you point it at your Security Lake data, and then let Q kind of chunk through it and look at all the tokens and build up any aliases and things. So we have that there. Kind of back to the dashboard. I don't have a laser pointer, but can you read up top? Ask a question about Security Lake CloudTrail, Security Lake Enterprise CloudTrail. Little dialogue pops off the side. Hopefully everybody can see it. These are a combination of the AI generated some questions for me, and or other users in the system have actually gone through and verified that that is a good question. We're going to pick one. Again, demo time. How many distinct services by operation? That may be something that the SOC team or the board wants to look at to pull into a dashboard, whether it's a BI dashboard or something else. It builds up. I didn't do anything but ask that question. It builds up a whole bunch of visuals for me, and when I find what I like, I can say pin it to the board. So I'm going to pick a couple here, and I picked unique number of services by operation, and then total events by operation. So if we quickly look at my pin board, I've got two visuals. So what I'm going to do one more time is I'm going to go through and now find a couple other visuals and put them on my pin board. If I had time, I then would show you how to move it over to the full QuickSight dashboard that was built up a second ago. But we're going to go look at Security Hub data, right? Any log source finding or partner that is coming into Security Hub, that data is also very, very easily available in Security Lake. And now in this demo, it's actually also available in QuickSight and Q. And so, if you can see where are some that are AI generated, you kind of can look at the dialogue. Nobody typed that one there. It was actually generated by the AI when that topic was built. So we'll click on it and see how good it was. All right, surprisingly, the vendor's AWS mostly, but let's just add to the pin board. And now the next step I would do to build up that dashboard that we originally saw is I would now share these and start building up another a dashboard. Just quickly looking at some of the ones that were built previously. I've got a CloudTrail summary that was built. Once it loads, come on, demo time. Well, that loads. What you can also do, one of the slides that Himanshu had there was building up a data story. And what I'd like to say is, I've got to do a presentation tomorrow. My CISO said, hey, I got a board meeting. I want to know how we're doing on security, right? How long would we have to prepare those slides and grab data from so many other different teams? In the interest of time, I'll show you one that I did a minute ago. And just to reveal, in the data story dialogue, I put in that text. As a SOC manager, I actually asked our internal chat system to give me that dialogue, so I used another chat system to actually build that up for me. And you go through that, you pick a couple visuals you want, you wait for your demo to load, and it now gives me a let's say a beginning, a very quick head start for building up slides to give to my CISO. When the demo loads, I've now got those visuals I picked. I've got explanations for the CISO or the board for each of those visuals, so I don't have to write them. This has all been generated. I didn't type anything except for that prompt that I showed you. So, and
I think
we're done.
There's a few things here to note. One, you might ask, you can actually aggregate all this data yourself. This is where Security Lake helps one by automating and bringing that data easily. And the second aspect is the performance of the transformation element, which is rather than you having to go in and perform ETL on that data, the data is all normalized in OCSF, so hence it's easier for any RAG and or generative AI tooling to actually use that data and easily interpret natural language processing on top of that and build those insights in Amazon Q and or our other generative AI applications. So with that, thanks a lot. I think we're a little over time. We'll be right around here if you have any follow-up questions. There's also a full-on session tomorrow on Amazon Security Lake and its use cases with one of our customers.
That's today.
Later today. That if you're interested, you can actually go in and listen to how they are leveraging Security Lake and they put that into practice as well.
And you'll see this demo will be a little longer in that session later on. So,
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.